This week, Bill sent me a beautiful story that talked about non-locality. And it's a story that's told by Pastor Rob Reed. And he said that as a new pastor and his wife, they were assigned to a church that was in an inner city, well, actually in Brooklyn, but an inner city place, and they were so excited about it, they couldn't wait to get there, and they got there in October, and the church was so run down. It needed so much work, and so they set the goal to have everything done by Christmas Eve. And they worked hard, they repaired pews, they plastered the walls, they painted, and on December the 18th, they were ahead of schedule and just about finished. And on December 19th, there was a driving rainstorm that hit the area and lasted for 2 days. And on the 21st, when the pastor went to the church, his heart sank because there'd been a leak, and this wall had kind of crumbled. And he just didn't quite know what to do. He cleaned up the mess off the floor, and he thought, I don't want to cancel Christmas Eve. Well, you can't cancel Christmas Eve. But he and his wife went to a flea market, and they saw this beautiful ivory-colored crocheted tablecloth, and they hung it up on the wall, and it covered the whole magnificently, and it just made it look really nice. And so the minister was there, and he was putting it up and admiring it, and there was a woman that came in, and she had missed her bus, and she stepped in out of the cold, and he invited her to come sit down, and he noticed that she kept looking at this tablecloth. And finally she asked him, she said, would you look and see if there's some initials on it? And sure enough, when he looked, these initials were there, and it was a tablecloth that she had crocheted before World War II. And she went on to tell the minister about the fact that she and her husband had gotten separated, and that she had not seen him, and that she had not seen the tablecloth in 45 years. Here's the minister. God, it's her tablecloth. His wall. And so, he's got to do the right thing, and he offers her the tablecloth back, and she says, no, it looks beautiful there. And so he, doing the right thing, drove her home. And he learned more about her. And of course, you already know how this story is going to end, because it's a story that has a nice feeling to it. It demonstrates this non-locality. On Christmas Eve, they had a wonderful Christmas Eve service, and everybody was so happy to see each other and to worship in their new worship space. And as they were leaving, there was one gentleman still sitting there. And the man, when the pastor went to talk to him, he said, my wife crocheted a tablecloth just like that. And I haven't seen her in 45 years. And the pastor took the man for a drive and reunited the couple. Once your hearts are connected, they can never be separated. And so that so beautifully illustrated that principle to me. I couldn't help but tell you this story because it touched my heart when I read it, and I see that it's touched some of your hearts. So this book was filled with little experiments that we do, and we did. And some of them we did more successfully than others. Some of us saw all sorts of kind of cars, blue ones with pink polka dots. And Julie, where are you? She and I on Monday saw a red car with rainbows on it. Wasn't looking for it. Couldn't believe it. But each of those experiments have been to prove that reality is malleable. that you and I, what we think, our consciousness trumps matter. And you and I have the power to shape our lives with our minds. The premise is that there is an invisible energy field, or field of infinite possibilities. That's what our author calls the FP. Now, I'm going to tell you what Charles Fillmore called that, out of Revealing Word. Substance. The divine idea of the underlying reality of all things. Substance is everywhere present, pervades all things, and inspires to action. It underlies all manifestation and is the spiritual essence, the living energy out of which everything is made. Sounds like an invisible force field to me. The second thing that our book wanted to teach us is that you and I impact this field, and we draw from it according to our beliefs and our expectations. Divine substance is man's supply. Divine substance is our supply. Out of it we form whatever we will according to our faith and understanding. By entering into the silence, acknowledging divine substance, affirming our faith and oneness in it, we become conscious of substance. Spiritual realization of divine substance enriches our awareness of the omnipresent, invisible substance, ever ready to take form in accordance to our mental pattern. Ever ready to transform in accordance to our mental pattern. When you and I connect with this field that Charles Fillmore calls substance, and that our author calls the FP, the field of infinite potential, it provides accurate and unlimited guidance. Here's a quote from Eric Butterworth. "You are forever in the flow of guidance. Don't wait to be guided. We are told to wait on the Lord, but the word wait comes from the root word that means to bind together. This kind of waiting implies plugging in to the divine circuits. It is not a question of time, but a depth of consciousness. Expect to be guided and then get in motion. Follow the guidance." So our little affirmation this morning on our connection card was, the universe is limitless, abundant, and strangely accommodating. And certainly some of our experiments have been strange. You want me to bring out the coat hangers? Today, our principle is the fish and loaves principle. It's the principle that the universe is limitless, abundant, and strangely accommodating. With this principle, learning it, knowing it, it dispels the myth that life sucks and then you die. It dispels the myth that there's only so much to go around. And that's whether we're talking about money or time or relationships or creativity or physical vitality or enjoyment. How many of you have dogs? How many of your dogs like bones? My dog likes a bone as good as any dog. And she's not a very big dog. So if you give her a little bone, she's going to pretty much gnaw on it until it disappears. But if you give her a big bone, she's going to chew all of the meat off of it and, as I say, suck it dry and leave it laying on the patio. And days later, she will go back and she will find that bone. And she'll be so excited, it's a bone, and she will pick it up and discard it pretty quickly. Might as well be a piece of celery, which she has no regard for, unless it has been filled with bacon drippings. That used bone is of no value to her. And what happens in your life and my life is that sometimes things become what we are so interested in. And what happens is one day we wake up to the truth that those things are just like those dried up bones. They have no value. And we find out that objects can't supply us true satisfaction. It's a sort of a radical realization when we get it that all objects are intrinsically empty of the capacity to feed us in the way that we really want or need to be fed. And so for many of us, objects of longing gradually reveal themselves to offer no real happiness. No matter how much we gnaw on them, we don't find any meat on the bone. There's a story in the book about a reporter who is interviewing a businessman, and he's had this phenomenal success, and as she's interviewing, she just sees these rabid dollar signs in his eyes, and she asked him if there was a profit margin, a success indicator, a dollar amount of some kind that would ever be considered enough. And the business owner stopped for a minute and he looked at her really like she was nuts. And he says, "You don't get it. There is never enough." And what I realize is that sometimes you and I live out there in that city of scarcity. That city where we're afraid that there's not enough. Where we feel strapped, where we're always on guard. Although in truth, we have a divine inheritance and we are rich beyond measure. When Jesus prayed over the fish and the loaves, he didn't fret about how this might turn out. With those, how many people? 5,000 people, depending on the account. Thousands of people there, and with one fish and a few loaves, he didn't fret about what it looked like. He knew that abundance was his divine right. And what did he do? He gave thanks. He was in a state of gratitude. You know, I think that the Lexi, when she goes for that dry bone, is not in too much of a state of gratitude. I don't think that business owner who can never get enough is in a state of gratitude for what they've already been given. Because their faith is in the form, not in the formless. So our principle is to remind us to have faith in the formless, to be in touch with that infinite field, and to trust and to know that you and I never have to live in that city of scarcity again. So I want to tell you a story about what unwavering faith will do. This is a story of Karen Elaine Johnson. She was born on November 13th in 1949. She lived in a housing project in Manhattan with her mother Emma and her youngest brother Clyde. Her father left when she was little, and her mother supported both of the two children. And although they had little money, her mother wanted the best for them, and she worked to give them opportunities, and to that end she enrolled them in for acting school lessons at the Hudson Guild. It was a community program for inner city children. And that was where Karen was first introduced to the arts and drama that would shape her life. She'd rush home from school and go without sleep to watch old movies. Any of you remember the old movies that used to be on about after school? I even remember the music they played with it. When I hear it, I think movie time. Don't know what the name of it is, but I know that music. Karen says, when I saw Carol Lombard coming down the stairs in a long satin thing, I thought, I can do that. I wanted to come down those stairs and say those words and live that life. You could be anything up there in the movies. Karen says you can fly, you can meet alien life forms, you could be a queen. You could sleep in a great big bed with satin sheets in your own room. Karen had strong features, and she was very shy, and she loved old movies. She was alienated from her classmates, but she continued to hold the vision of Carol Lombard floating down the stairs in satin. Karen said, acting is the one thing I always knew I could do. Karen was suspected of being mentally retarded because she had misdiagnosed dyslexia. She quit school her first year of high school. She went out and lived a rather riotous life, including drugs. And when she was 18, by the time she was 18, she'd already been on drugs and been in drug therapy, and she ended up marrying her drug therapist and having a daughter. The marriage ended, and there she was, a single mom. She moved to San Diego with her daughter, and she worked as a bricklayer. She got a scholarship to a school for cosmetology, and she worked at a mortuary doing hair on bodies. For 2 years, she laid bricks and she did hair. But during this time, she never gave up her desire for acting. And she continued to audition, and finally it paid off. She found a group of like-minded actors at the San Diego Repertory Theater, where she learned to hone her dramatic skills and her comedic skills. And through all this time, she could continue to believe anything is possible. Acting is the one thing I always knew I could do. And Karen got noticed by Hollywood director Mike Nichols. He was so impressed with her, he signed her for a one-woman performance called The Spook Show, which on Broadway. Steven Spielberg saw her and cast her as Celie in The Color Purple. She then changed her name to Whoopi Goldberg. In her autobiography, Whoopi said, "I can do anything, I can be anything. No one ever told me I couldn't. No one ever expressed the idea that I was limited to any one thing." And so I think in terms of what is possible, not what is impossible. I learned that if you come to a thing with no preconceived notions of what that thing is, the whole world can be your canvas. Just dream it and you can make it so. I believe I belong wherever I want to be, in whatever situation or context I place myself. I believe that a little girl raised in Manhattan projects from a single-parent household, who became a single parent, who struggled through 7 years on welfare and odd jobs, could still wind up making movies. And she says, so yeah, I think anything is possible. I know it because I have lived it. I know it because I have seen it. I have witnessed things that the ancients have called miracles, but they are not miracles. They are the product of someone's dreams. As human beings, we are capable of creating a paradise and making each other's lives better by our own hands. Yes, yes, yes. This is possible. If something hasn't happened, it's not because it can't happen or won't. It just hasn't happened yet. Yeah, pretty cool, isn't it? Pretty cool. And pretty cool to write it all down so that we can read it and say, look what she did. There's nothing holding you and I back. Einstein said reality is merely an illusion, albeit a persistent one. And how many have let your current reality be too persistent too long? Yeah. For this last experiment of 48 hours, you are asked to keep track of all that is good and all that is beautiful in your life. Paleontologist Jay Gould said the fossil records show long interrupted periods of biological stability. We think of our history as one of wars, treachery, and competition. However, he says human courtesy, kindness, and beauty are the norm. It is our duty, our holy responsibility, to record and honor the victorious weight of all of the innumerable little kindnesses that are too often unnoted and invisible. Our author says it's a structural paradox that one violent act so distracts us from 10,000 acts of kindness. So the assignment to complete this series is to keep a journal near you so that you can record all of the little kindnesses. Might be someone brings you a cup of coffee in the morning. Thank you, Gerald. Having a cheerful cashier at Publix or Walmart or Bell's, having someone hold the door for you, having someone bring you something that they found that they thought you could wear. Thank you, Janine. Having a friend text you and say, I love you, or I miss you, or I want to see you. So you got a lab sheet when you came in this morning. And if you pull it out, you'll see that the principle is the fish and loaves principle. The theory is the universe is limitless, abundant, and strangely accommodating. And the question is my focus on the negative keeping me from seeing reality? That's your question this week. Is my focus on the negative keeping me from seeing reality? And the hypothesis is if I change my outlook and make a concerted effort to look for goodness, beauty, and abundance, it will show up in spades. Time required, 48 hours. The approach, I'm just reading this right off the lab sheet. I've heard the old adage, what you appreciate appreciates, so I guess I'll give it a whirl. Who knows, maybe expressing gratitude is more than just mumbo-jumbo Pollyanna Oprah thing. Willie Nelson, after all, said that when he started counting his blessings, his whole life turned around. Like Willie, I'm ready to bet on the probability of peace, bliss, and joy. Consequently, I will actively seek goodness with a vengeance. So our invitation as we end our book is to seek goodness with a vengeance. And if you want to experience goodness with a vengeance, come back next Sunday because our children have something prepared for you.